This happened back in the summer of 2018, during what was supposed to be one of the best experiences of my life. I was 17, freshly out of high school, and had landed a job as a junior counselor at a rustic sleepaway camp nestled deep within the Vermont woods. For context, this wasn't some trendy, highly commercialized place with high-speed Wi-Fi and indoor plumbing in every building. No, Camp Ashford was remote, raw, and mostly unplugged from the modern world. The nearest cell tower was at least 15 miles away, and the staff relied on walkie-talkies and scheduled check-ins to communicate. It was the kind of place you only went to if you genuinely loved nature. I arrived in late June, greeted by a dusty gravel road, a swarm of mosquitoes, and the kind of silence you don't hear until you're far from civilization. Camp Ashford housed about 60 kids ranging from ages 8 to 13, and about 15 counselors and support staff. The cabins were wooden, window-screened, and set up in a crescent shape around a central campfire area. Each counselor was assigned a group of campers and a co-counselor. Mine was a guy named Kyle. We got along great, same age, same dumb sense of humor, and both trying to make the most of the summer before college. The first 2 weeks were routine. Mornings began with bells, followed by hikes, swimming lessons, arts and crafts, and the occasional wildlife safety drill. The kids were a handful, but nothing out of the ordinary. But as July rolled in, something began to shift. One night, after lights out, one of the younger campers from Cabin 4, a timid kid named Henry, approached me in the dark, wide-eyed and shaking. He said he couldn't sleep because he saw someone walking around in the woods behind their cabin. I asked him if he was sure it wasn't just an animal, but he insisted it was a person. I calmed him down, walked him back, and promised to keep watch. I chalked it up to overactive imagination or too many ghost stories. But then another kid from the same cabin mentioned it the following night. Then another. By the end of the week, I had 5 different reports from kids in Cabin 4, all saying the same thing. Someone was watching them from the trees. Kyle and I started taking shifts at night, staying up later to monitor the perimeter, but we never saw anything at first. Then came the rope. It was a Thursday, and we had just finished a bonfire with s'mores and acoustic guitar songs. After tucking the kids in, Kyle and I decided to do a quick patrol. We walked around Cabin 4 and noticed something odd. A thick rope stretched taut between 2 trees, about 2.5 feet off the ground. It was tied with precision, not just wrapped around the trunks, but knotted in a way that looked professional, like someone had experience with outdoor traps. We radioed in the find. The head counselor, a guy named Rick, brushed it off as a prank. Probably some kids messing around, he said. But none of the campers had been near that section of woods, and besides, the knotting was too advanced. It looked like something you'd see in survival training. The following morning, shoe prints were found in the mud near the back of Cabin 7. Barefoot prints, large ones. The direction of the prints was even more unsettling. They didn't lead into the woods. They circled the cabin and then vanished. No signs of entry, no signs of exit. Just a loop. That night, Kyle and I stayed awake, both of us wired from too much instant coffee and nerves. Around 2 a.m., we heard a soft crunch of leaves just outside our cabin. I killed the lantern and we crouched low near the window. That's when we saw him. A figure. Male. Shirtless. His skin looked pale, almost gray in the moonlight. He was standing just at the edge of the woods, maybe 15 feet from Cabin 4, facing the building. Not moving. Just watching. We stepped out of our cabin and shouted, "Hey, you okay?" The figure didn't respond. I shone my flashlight toward him, but by the time the beam reached the spot, he was gone. No running footsteps. No breaking branches. Just gone. The next day, Rick finally took us seriously. We had a meeting with the rest of the staff and decided to bring in the local sheriff's department. 2 deputies came out and did a sweep. They found an abandoned campsite about 200 yards into the woods, an old sleeping bag, some empty cans, a broken hunting knife, and a notebook. The notebook was the worst part. It was filled with pages of numbers and nonsense words, like a child had scribbled without understanding language. But one page stood out. It was a detailed map of the camp, every cabin labeled, paths marked, and notes like good hiding and watch from here. There were sketches of counselors too, crude ones, but it was enough to match. We were told to keep quiet about it. No need to scare the campers, they said. The police said they found no threat, just a homeless man squatting in the woods. They asked us to keep reporting anything unusual. But here's the thing. The last week of camp, Henry, the kid who first saw him, was found crying under his bunk. When we asked what was wrong, he just said he was looking through the window again. But this time, he smiled. Camp Ashford shut down the following summer. I never went back. I was 16 the summer it happened, working my first ever job as a junior counselor at a sleepaway camp in northern Michigan. The camp sat right along a lake, completely surrounded by dense woods. It was one of those old school, rustic camps with wooden cabins, no Wi-Fi, no air conditioning, and definitely no cell service. The kind of place your parents send you to unplug, make friends, and come back covered in bug bites and memories. I'd been going to this camp since I was a kid, so I knew it well. But being staff was different. We had real responsibilities, watching kids, leading activities, and staying up late making sure no one snuck out to go skinny dipping or raid the kitchen. It was exhausting but fun. The nights, though, were the hardest. My assigned cabin was the last one on the row, Cabin Pine. It sat right at the edge of the forest, a bit farther from the others. It had 6 campers, all around 10 years old, and I shared it with another counselor named Jordan. Jordan was a chill guy, older than me by 2 years, and the kind of person who never took anything seriously. The weird stuff started on the second night of our second week. It was around 3 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside the cabin. Now, that wasn't too unusual. Sometimes campers would sneak out to use the bathroom. But these steps were slow, deliberate, not the light pitter-patter of a kid running barefoot. This was heavier, adult. I quietly got out of bed, not wanting to wake the kids, and peeked through the curtain of the front window. For a second, I didn't see anything, just moonlight through the trees. But then I saw a person, standing at the edge of the woods, not moving, just watching. I couldn't see their face, just their silhouette. They stood still for so long I started to think maybe I imagined it. But then they stepped back into the woods and vanished. I stayed at the window for almost an hour that night, waiting to see if they'd come back. They didn't. The next morning, I told Jordan. He laughed, said it was probably a maintenance worker or another counselor pulling a prank. I didn't push it, but I didn't forget either. 2 nights later, it happened again. This time, the footsteps circled the cabin. I didn't even bother trying to sleep. I sat up in bed, holding a flashlight, heart pounding. I didn't look outside that time. I was too scared. I just listened. In the morning, I found small boot prints in the dirt behind the cabin. I showed Jordan. He shrugged, said it was probably his, but his boots were way bigger. That day, I went to the camp director, Amanda, and told her what I'd seen. She didn't laugh, but she also didn't seem too concerned. Said she'd talk to the groundskeeper and have staff check the perimeter more often. I didn't feel reassured. By the end of the week, the entire vibe in our cabin had changed. The kids were more anxious. One girl, Hannah, said she thought someone was tapping on her window at night. Another swore she saw a man in the woods during arts and crafts. Jordan still played it cool, but even he was locking the door at night now. One night, Friday, I stayed up past lights out. I was sitting on the porch steps of the cabin with a flashlight, watching the tree line. Everything was quiet. Then I heard the crunch of leaves. This time, I saw him clearly. A man, maybe in his 40s, thin, dirty, wearing a tattered hoodie and jeans, barefoot. He stepped out from behind a tree about 30 feet from me. Just stared. I stood up, flashlight trembling in my hand. "Who are you?" I yelled. No answer. He took one step forward. I turned and ran inside, slammed the door, locked it, and grabbed Jordan. We woke up the kids and kept them all in the center of the cabin. Jordan saw the guy too through the front window. We called the main office on the walkie. Amanda and a few other staff arrived 10 minutes later. When they searched the woods, the man was gone. But they found signs, empty food wrappers, a dirty blanket, and a knife sticking out of a tree stump. That night, they moved our campers to a different cabin closer to the lodge. Amanda finally admitted something. Over the past 2 summers, there had been vague reports of a drifter seen in the woods. They dismissed them as urban legend or mistaken identity. No one ever got close enough to prove anything until now. They never found the guy. The sheriff was called and they swept the area, but he was gone. The camp installed new motion lights, added security patrols, and the staff was told not to talk to the kids about it. But the campers knew. Kids always know. The rest of the summer passed without any more sightings, but I didn't sleep right for weeks. Every creak, every owl hoot, every breeze through the trees set my nerves on fire. On the last day of camp, when parents came to pick up the kids, one mom pulled me aside. Her daughter, Hannah, the one who said someone tapped on her window, had drawn a picture. It showed a man, pale, barefoot, standing outside the cabin window, smiling. She said she saw him again last night, the mom whispered, outside the dining hall, watching her through the glass. I never went back to that camp, but I still have dreams. Dreams where I wake up in cabin pine, and I know, before I even look, that someone's standing at the window, smiling. This happened in the summer of 2019. My girlfriend and I had been driving cross-country from Ohio to California to visit her family. It wasn't our first road trip together, but it was definitely the longest. We stopped at national parks, quirky towns, cheap diners, all the typical road trip stuff. Somewhere in Arizona, we were about 10 hours from our final destination when exhaustion caught up to us. It was past midnight, and we decided to pull off the highway and find a motel to crash for the night. We passed a sign for a place called Sunridge Motel about 5 miles off the interstate. It looked like one of those old 1960s desert motels that time forgot. Neon sign half buzzing, a single row of doors, dusty parking lot, and a tired-looking clerk behind a scratched-up plexiglass window. But it was cheap, $47 cash, no card machine, and we were too tired to be picky. The clerk gave us room 9, all the way at the end. He handed me a rusty-looking metal key and said, "Quiet hours are from 11 to 7. Don't go wandering around back. It's fenced for a reason." I wasn't in the mood for cryptic small talk, so I just nodded, and we headed down to our room. It was small, musty, but tolerable. One queen bed, a tube TV with no remote, a single lamp flickering slightly when we turned it on. My girlfriend, Jamie, crashed immediately, still in her jeans, curled under the blanket. I stayed up a bit longer, scrolling through my phone, trying to ignore the scratchy sheets and weird smell of mildew. I remember glancing out the curtain-covered window a few times. It faced the parking lot, which was lit only by a single overhead floodlight. Nothing out there. Just our car and one other truck parked a few spaces down. Sometime after 2 a.m., I dozed off. At exactly 3:11 a.m., I woke up with the feeling that something wasn't right. No sound, no dreams, just a full-body alertness that hit me like a slap. My skin felt cold. My hands were clammy. Then I noticed it. The curtain over the window, the one facing the parking lot, was slightly open. Not wide, just enough for a sliver of light from outside to spill into the room. And behind that gap, there was an eye. I froze. At first, I thought it might be a reflection. Some weird trick of the light, but it blinked. Someone was standing outside our motel window, looking in. Not moving, not knocking, just watching. I sat up slowly, heart pounding, and whispered, "Jamie." She stirred, but didn't fully wake. I leaned closer to the curtain, stupid, I know, but I had to be sure. The face became clearer. A man, middle-aged, sunburnt skin, long gray hair sticking to his forehead, and a smile. That's what got me. He was smiling, wide, too wide, like someone trying to mimic a grin, but not quite understanding how human expressions work. I backed away from the window and stood by the bathroom door. I didn't want to cause a scene or scare Jamie until I figured out what to do. I quietly picked up my phone. No service. Of course. I whispered again, louder. Jamie, wake up. She sat up this time, rubbing her eyes. What? There's someone outside the window. Her face went pale instantly. She pulled the blanket around her and whispered, Are you serious? I nodded and moved toward the front door, quietly locking the deadbolt. I peered through the peephole. Nobody there. But when I turned back toward the window, he was gone. Just empty parking lot. We stayed up for the next 2 hours, sitting fully dressed on the bed, clutching the tire iron from the trunk. No knock, no movement, no sounds. Around 5:30 a.m., as the sky began to lighten, we heard a soft knock, not at the front door, but from the bathroom wall. I stared at the door, unsure if I'd imagined it. Then another knock. Jamie whispered, That came from the wall. There was no one in the bathroom. I checked. We even looked under the sink, in the vent, nothing. The wall behind the bathroom was part of the fenced-off area the clerk had warned us about. At first light, we packed up everything and sprinted out to the car. Before we left, I walked over to the office to tell the clerk what had happened. But the office was locked, and the sign on the door said, Closed permanently, no vacancies. Confused, I looked around for our car and spotted a man walking near the back of the property, just past the fence. He had the same long gray hair. I didn't get a good look at his face. He was dragging something behind him, a large trash bag, and disappeared around the corner of an abandoned building behind the motel. We didn't wait to ask questions. We drove for nearly 2 hours before we found a diner with cell service and called the sheriff's department. They said they'd send someone to check, but when I followed up a few days later, they told me the Sunridge Motel had been closed for months. Owner died. Property in dispute. Locals said weird stuff kept happening out there, lights turning on by themselves, noises, squatters. But no one ever reported a man at the window. To this day, I don't know if we saw a ghost, a drifter, or something worse. But one thing's for sure, he was watching us all night. And that smile, it wasn't human.